The entire population was transmigrated into an apocalyptic survival game. Everyone went insane fighting over superpowers, but I chose something else. I picked an inexhaustible supply of money, and the others just laughed at me. They said I was brain damaged, claiming money would be worthless paper in the apocalypse. But how could they possibly understand? Zombies were never the real threat. The living with superpowers are the most terrifying ones. With a system announcement, I and 300 other players were thrown into the game. The system explained that all of us had already died in the real world. This was our chance to see the future, our chance to live again, provided we survived until the very end of this apocalypse. Then came the moment to choose our starting items. We checked the shelves that offered basically everything. Every kind of superpower was there for the taking. The other men fought like animals, willing to kill just to grab one. I went straight to the very last page of the list. At the bottom, I saw a gold coin labeled Infinite Wealth. Without a second thought, I took the gold coin and walked away. My classmate, Wang Tung, had chosen mind control. When he saw me take the coin, he couldn't help but mock me. "You're a real miser. The world is ending, so what good is money?" Before I could even explain, he turned toward our class beauty, Lu Rian. She had chosen the power of universal love to make all of humanity adore her. "Even zombies will be moved by me," she claimed. "With true love protecting me, I can't die." Once everyone claimed their items, the system voice echoed through the void once more. It announced we had exactly 1 year to train our powers and prepare for battle. The apocalypse mode would officially begin in 365 days. This game would have only one winner in the end. Only the final survivor would have the right to claim the grand prize. The moment those words rang out, everyone's expression shifted. The people who were just talking about forming alliances fell silent. The atmosphere turned cold and heavy. They began looking at each other with pure suspicion. In this survival game, friends didn't exist anymore. Everyone was an enemy. Without losing a single second, I slipped away from the crowd. I immediately put my apocalyptic survival plan into motion. I scanned the world map and searched for the perfect location. I set my sights on a remote island in the middle of the Pacific. It was far from seismic belts and hurricane zones, the perfect place to build my fortress. The island had a natural plain, perfect for building an airport, with green mountains acting as a shield. Without hesitation or holding back, I bought the entire island. I named it Future Island to the outside world. I declared that I was developing a massive new tourism project. I bought 17 industrial giants at once and signed a contract with the corporate bank. I finalized construction contracts with the NPCs. Then, I transported all the heavy machinery and materials to the island. I forced the NPC executives to sign strict non-disclosure agreements. Not even they knew the exact location of Future Island. Once the yachts arrived, the security workers left for the city. They immediately began building a functional, no-frills airport. I purchased 100 planes and prepared them for transport. I used them to fly workers from all over the world to the island. The laborers worked day and night, so they wouldn't have time to think or ask questions. I bought signal jamming equipment in advance and confiscated every worker's phone. On the surface, I built 10 super reinforced fortresses using the highest quality materials. They were built to the highest standards, capable of withstanding a magnitude 12 earthquake. The exterior of the fortresses was camouflaged so satellites couldn't track them. I let the world see what I wanted them to see, but it was all just a facade. The real apocalyptic stronghold was underground, built to survive nuclear bombs and biochemical attacks. Even if there were digging zombies, they'd never break through these 5-meter-thick steel walls. The surface fortresses had secret tunnels that connected directly to the underground. But these tunnels were narrow, designed to only let one person pass at a time. The interior was built like a death trap. It was a complete labyrinth. Even with pure luck, finding the right path was nearly impossible. Reaching the main gate meant dodging lethal traps and hidden mechanisms along the way. If one tunnel exploded, I could still use the others to reach the surface during the apocalypse. In a world gone dark, energy is the key to survival. To solve the power supply issue, I installed wind generators across the island. I added tidal and nuclear power systems to ensure the lights never went out. Water was another easy problem to fix. I installed a massive rainwater collection network. I added a desalination system and even expanded the usable land. I tapped into the deep groundwater to ensure a constant flow from the earth. I brought in advanced filtration equipment to purify every drop. It could treat contaminated apocalyptic water and make it perfectly drinkable. I included instant high-temperature and low-temperature sterilization units. I added UV rays and chemical treatments to the lineup. It was the ultimate water treatment system. A specialized sewage system handled all the waste from my underground fortress. I waterproofed every single wall and installed armored doors to prevent flooding. Once those doors closed, the entire place became hermetically sealed. The underground drainage system was built to be incredibly solid and reliable. I installed multiple air filtration units to keep the bunker's air supply fresh and pure. On top of that, I stockpiled 100,000 oxygen tanks. To prepare for any emergency, I divided the underground bunker into 12 completely separate compartments. If one or two of them failed, I still had the others as a backup, each one fully functional. Every compartment had its own specific purpose. They used the latest technology to generate oxygen automatically. I set up areas to grow vegetables, raise fish, and even keep chickens. 2 compartments held enough food, water, and medicine to last me 10 years. When the workers grew suspicious of the project, they tried to shut me down. I handed out massive bonuses to ensure their cooperation. Their silence was bought, and the work continued. Next, I traveled to the United States to buy a massive arsenal of weapons. I focused on heavy firepower, including high-tech gear. I even secured mobile combat robots and automated drones. I even picked up light combat gear. And because the money I offered was so high, I managed to get my hands on 2 nuclear bombs within the country. I sourced them through the black market in one go. In the bay, I hid a nuclear submarine and a jet. The underground fortress was built to withstand a displacement of 1.5 meters. I dug a tunnel connecting directly to the bay to ensure I could escape if needed. To stop players with superpowers from entering the island, I built massive artificial reefs offshore. Any large ships trying to pass through would run aground and sink. Closer to the shore, I installed a high-voltage power grid around the entire island. Along the coastline, I buried underwater mines and also set up a specialized radar system. It was designed to detect anything that dared to approach my territory. To give myself enough time to shoot down threats, I expanded my reach. I stretched a giant electric net across the sky to stop virus-carrying birds from landing. In just 1 year, the island's entire defense system was complete. Of course, to deceive my enemies, I had to make them feel welcome at the front door. I did the same in other parts of the world. I launched several massive development projects, disguising my fortress as a large-scale tourist resort. I even set up markers so the other players wouldn't get lost. They won't suspect a thing, there's nothing to find. Did they really think those other shelters weren't just my backup points? I could fly directly to any of them, without ever needing to stop for fuel. Finally, I dismissed the last group of NPCs. I stood completely alone on the island, feeling like a king. I poured a fortune into a space exploration company, and took control of over 6,000 satellites in orbit. I had to ensure my internet connection would never drop, not even for a second during this final year. Then, I bought out every major airline, and every shipping company on the planet. In that one final week, I made my move. I ordered the total destruction of every single airplane, and every transport ship I owned. The entire world watched in shock. They realized the richest man on Earth had just wiped out global travel. From a distance, the NPCs thought I had finally lost my mind. But the players knew better. The richest man was the only one who could go the distance. My biggest competitor in the world was watching me too. A small window popped up on the player chat interface. Wang Ting asked me, "Mark, you're that richest man, aren't you?" He was the only one who saw me choose infinite wealth, but I ignored him completely. 1 week later, the real apocalypse finally arrived. The players who had maxed out their superpowers were restless as our names appeared on the public screen. I was number 99, Wang Tung was 100, and Lu Ruyan, the girl I liked, was 101. A notification flashed. "Attention, the apocalypse has begun. This game will continue until only one player remains." Nobody expected how the end would actually start. The eclipse began with torrential rains. Massive storms swept across the globe, pouring down through the night. The nonstop downpour triggered a disaster. A universal flood was drowning the world. Even my future island was being hammered by the storm. The rain was relentless. Since it was just a small island, the storm clouds gathered thicker and faster. The storms only lasted 2 days before passing. But I didn't even have time to take cover in my underground fortress. The other players with superpowers were completely blindsided. They had arrived in this world as paupers and spent a whole year training their powers. They had to struggle just to find a way to make money, and it was grueling work. The meager savings they managed to scrape together were pathetically small. It only took a moment for it all to vanish. A few players used their powers for evil, buying mansions and building basement shelters. As a result, the flood swallowed their basements first. All of their supplies were instantly submerged underwater. Soon, their entire mansions were swept away by the raging current. Players who built shelters in underground parking lots were also flooded out. Those in high-rise apartments were safe for now, but the rain wouldn't stop. The players' already scarce supplies were rapidly running out. Total panic began to set in for everyone. Meanwhile, I was relaxing, eating snacks, and watching a live stream. The streamer was hiding behind a curtain, secretly filming the building across the street. A player was using fire powers to steal supplies from his neighbors. "Brothers, this isn't some special effect," the streamer whispered. "This guy is a real superhuman. He used to be the security guard. He was the security guard for our complex, and look at him now. He's using fire to melt down a door. This is the 10th house he's robbed during this stream." Comments flooded the screen, asking, "Are there really people with superpowers? Does this mean the apocalypse is here?" Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The fire players' actions alerted the authorities, and a massive special forces team arrived in rescue boats at the Mexico City complex. They surrounded the building, weapons drawn and ready. The streamer's hands were shaking with excitement. "Brothers, it's my first time seeing a real shootout. That guy's fire is so intense it melted the iron door in an instant." The special forces units moved in with precision, breaching the building and storming the floor. The air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire. The exchange was brutal and intense. Suddenly, a figure was blown off the roof and plummeted straight into the floodwaters. A few moments later, I watched a player's name on the public game screen turn gray, signaling their death. Right then, Wang Ting popped up in the chat again, looking for me. "Mark, let's form an alliance. We're old classmates and our ranks are close. We'd make it to the end together." He had the nerve to send me a video call request, but I kept ignoring him. I knew his game. If we were the last two left, wouldn't you just use your mind control to kill me and take the win for yourself? Did he underestimate my intelligence, or just overestimate his own? The water was cut off, the power failed, and food became a memory. 3 months of flooding washed away every shred of hope the NPCs had left. Finally, people snapped and began looting and destroying everything in their path. The players blended in with the desperate crowds, searching for any way to survive. But their superpowers were impossible to hide, and the high-ranking authorities took notice. Orders were issued to capture anyone with powers and drag them to research institutes. In just 1 month, 30 more names on the public screen turned gray. Paranoia set in as every player began looking over their shoulder, fearing for their lives. Meanwhile, I was living in a completely different world from the rest of them. I spent my days checking on my crops and playing video games in my massive mansion. I swam laps in my private pool, back and forth, without a care in the world. Future Island was a true paradise, the kind of life most men couldn't even dream of. I lived in total luxury, but I should have known the good times wouldn't last. Because in the end, someone betrayed me. An anonymous message flashed across the global public screen for everyone to see. Player number 99 is the richest man on Earth. He definitely built high-end shelters before the apocalypse. If we find player 99, we can all survive. The chat, which had been silent for days, exploded instantly. "Number 99, show your face." I was eating well and living in luxury while hundreds of them suffered. They called me cruel and ruthless, saying players like me should be eliminated. They claimed finding number 99 was their only chance to survive. Every player in the game went absolutely insane, driven by a desperate hunger for power. I felt like they wanted to skin me alive right then and there. I just wanted to survive in peace, but since they insisted on calling me out, I finally replied. I sent a message to the general channel: "Stop fighting. I'm number 99. If you want the shelters, you can have them." I told them I would build shelters in 4 locations: Hoa, Pilianwo, Angsawo, and Daisawo. But I added a catch. Each shelter could only hold a maximum of 20 people, and then I marked the 4 spots on the map. There were over 200 of them left on the world map. It was impossible to save everyone, but I gave them the passwords anyway. "First come, first served," I told them. "Now stop chasing me." The moment I posted those passwords, the chat exploded. They were overwhelmed with excitement at the thought of reaching a shelter first. By the next morning, the fastest players with movement abilities had already arrived. The shelters were built on high ground, safe from the flood, and felt like paradise to them. I had designed these 4 shelters with incredible luxury and every possible comfort. The freezers were even stocked to the brim with a massive variety of food. Player 58, full of himself, started a live stream on the World Channel. He bragged about how well-built the shelter was and how wonderful it felt to be rich. Inside, they were feasting on steaks and lamb legs, washing it all down with wine. The table was overflowing with delicacies, and player 58 announced there were already 12 of them inside. Then, they all agreed to lock down the Huawa shelter for good. They claimed resources were limited and that no one else needed to come in. The other players still on their way saw the broadcast and exploded with rage. Instead of dying in the flood, players kept arriving at the shelter's doorstep. They were facing death by drowning or starving to death with nothing to eat. Of course, they were going to cling to this one last hope. Even the players near Bogota were desperate. Their sheer will to survive turned them into scavengers willing to dig through anything. They were ready to give it their all. They begged the people inside to open the door, but the players inside had bolted it shut, ignoring every scream and every strike against the walls. No matter what skills they used, they couldn't budge that solid steel door while the players inside sat there gloating. I suddenly appeared in the chat and asked, "Didn't I say it fits 20? Can't 8 more get in?" I typed, "I have an override code. Even if they lock the door, you can still get in. The secret door is to the southeast. Find the embossed brick at the foot of the wall, turn it, and it'll appear." The players outside went wild and sprinted toward the wall like madmen. They found the secret spot and turned the brick, an ancient mechanism, etched into the ancient wall itself. The secret door groaned open, and players lunged forward to fight for those last 8 spots. A fragile-looking girl was running too slowly, falling behind the pack. Suddenly, thick vines began to sprout from her arms. Countless, thorny tendrils lashed out frantically toward the crowd. In a single instant, she dragged down a whole group of young men. Other players didn't hesitate to strike back. One player activated a sharp blade skill. He quickly hacked through the vines, tangled at his feet, and countered with a precise slash to the vine girl's throat. A player with Wind Blade was the first to reach the threshold. He punched in the override code. The door hissed open, and he rushed inside, ecstatic. I watched it all unfold, exactly as I planned. Then, another player blasted a group aside with a beam of light. He became the second one to make it inside. As for the third person approaching the door, a player behind him grabbed his thigh in a death grip. The player on the ground flashed a twisted, eerie smile. The poison coating his fingernails sank deep into the man's leg, but as the toxic player rose to run, a steel arm pierced his heart from behind. One by one, players collapsed in a heap right in front of the shelter door. The desperate urge to survive in this new world had driven them to absolute madness. It turned out that the skills granted by the system weren't just tools. They weren't meant for fighting off the hordes of zombies. They were meant for the players to massacre each other. Even the players already inside the shelter couldn't keep their cool. They had speed, but their combat power was lacking. If they didn't close that door and stop stronger players from entering, they would be the next ones to die. The blade user and the light beam player realized this the moment they stepped inside. They quickly formed an alliance and started fighting off the players, trying to get in, while the kill count in the global chat skyrocketed. Human nature is the same no matter where you go. Fierce battles to the death broke out in front of the other 3 shelters as well. But looking through the surveillance cameras, I couldn't find a single trace of Wang Tong. Of course, why would he ever go to a shelter? What a coincidence. Right then, Wang Tong sent me a message. "Mark, look at us. Even without being allies, we cooperate perfectly." The man had no shame. He was the one who leaked my identity and put me in this mess. "Don't be mad," he wrote. "If I hadn't planned this, how else would we lead them to their deaths? You should thank me for helping you eliminate the competition." While we chatted, the shelter reached capacity and the doors began to slide shut. Outside, rivers of blood ran as those who failed to enter drew their last breaths. The players inside were celebrating, but they had no idea what was coming. I smiled and told Wang Tong, "Too bad you aren't in the shelter with them." With those words, I reached out and pressed the detonator button. In an instant, 1,000 tons of explosives buried inside the shelter ignited. The shockwave disintegrated everyone inside, and even the survivors lingering outside. After the blast, the player count in the city center plummeted to near zero. The player count plummeted instantly. In that single moment, the count dropped to 116, then 91 survivors left. A long silence passed before Wang Tong finally messaged me again. "I underestimated you," he wrote. "Thanks for the help gathering them all in one spot." The top players most likely to reach Future Island were now erased from existence. He had been planning how to get rid of these people for an entire year. Those shelters were never meant to save them. They were custom-made tombs. News of the explosion wouldn't spread fast, leaving the remaining players in the dark. But the fact that Wang Tong knew immediately proved he was watching from a distance. As I watched the smoke clear, a system notification flashed before my eyes. "Congratulations, you have the highest kill count. Claim your bonus reward." I couldn't help but laugh. In this apocalypse, only the strongest make the rules. For months later, the floodwaters finally began to recede. The submerged land reappeared, and the survivors sighed in relief, thinking it was over. They didn't realize the flood had brought a plague, turning every corpse into a disaster zone. Ding! Stage 1 complete. Stage 2 begins now, the zombie apocalypse. Finally, the time has come for real combat skills to take center stage. Everyone was looking for that guy, Player 99. They expected to find me and tear me to pieces for what I did. But right at that moment, I was already moving. Lou Rian sent me a private message. "Mark, don't you have any skills? You won't survive a zombie apocalypse. Give me supplies and your location, and I'll protect you." I slowly typed back a single question mark. "Don't underestimate me," she replied. "I survived the flood because of my ability." I knew exactly how she survived, using her charms to manipulate others. She was a professional at scamming people out of their resources. She had stepped over her own neighbors to be the first one rescued. Thinking of that, I replied, "Sorry, I'm just not interested in you." She knew I was the wealthiest player left, and she wasn't about to let that go. Then, right on schedule, the zombie virus exploded across the continents. Since I had sent my bombers ahead to destroy the bridges, the island nations were cut off. With the transmission routes severed, basic zombies were easy enough to handle. But the virus evolved at a terrifying speed, and mutations began to appear just as I predicted. Zombies with human intelligence and special abilities started to emerge. If a zombie devoured a player with skills, it could steal those powers for itself. Players realized that without alliances, they were dead meat, so they started forming groups. They began constructing massive bases to survive the relentless zombie sieges. However, these bases didn't just fight zombies, they fought each other for loot. As the world tore itself apart, I focused on my own island's security. I installed massive steel nets in the sea to keep infected fish away from my shores. I even installed an electric grid in the sky to stop infected birds from landing. The sunlight felt dim and gloomy these days. Whenever it rained, I hid deep inside my underground fortress. I waited for the right moment. My high-tech sensors scanned every drop. Only after confirming the rain wasn't toxic did I dare to step outside. The mainland communication networks had been destroyed long ago, leaving NPCs with only radios. But I didn't need those antiques. I had thousands of satellites in orbit. They allowed me to monitor the entire planet in real time. It happened exactly as I predicted. The birds carried the virus across the sea. The infection rained down on the vulnerable island nations, turning them into hell on Earth. The global player count began to plummet. One by one, the names on the leaderboard were extinguished. The count dropped to only 30 survivors, but then something happened. A mutated zombie bird reached the airspace of my island. It slammed into the electric grid and was instantly charred by the high voltage. But a single infected feather slipped through a gap in the mesh. Before it could touch the ground, a robot dog incinerated it with a burst of flame. That bird likely came from the neighboring territories. Soon, swarms of them were hitting my grid daily, leaving the wires covered in scorched remains. With the island covered in bird carcasses, my robots worked without rest. They patrolled every inch, incinerating the bodies and cleaning the area. If even my future island was struggling, I could only imagine the nightmare elsewhere. I stopped my daily walks on the beach. I moved into my underground fortress permanently. Today was New Year's Day, but in this dying world, no one but me was in the mood to celebrate. I sat down for my New Year's Eve dinner and put on the last holiday gala recorded before the apocalypse. The spring festival lights flickered on the screen. I thought of my family, but I was completely alone now. A sharp pang of loneliness hit me right in the chest. I have to go back. I must become the sole winner of this game. I snapped a photo of my lavish New Year's dinner and sent it to 110. A minute later, Guan Tingya had posted my photo to the World Channel. I could already imagine the pure rage of the other players. The waves of indignant comments started flooding in immediately. Player 99 is living way too well, one wrote. Damn it, we don't even have hot food, and he has a full banquet. Don't be so arrogant, another threatened. Wait until we find you. I didn't give them the slightest bit of importance. I'll be waiting, if they can even find me. I closed the interface, opened my computer, and reviewed the files I had gathered on the trains. The other players would never imagine what I did before the apocalypse began. The world was already full of my eyes and ears. My mercenaries had tracked every player down. I've watched them for a long time, and I know every single one of their strengths and weaknesses. Once the world ended, my mercenaries survived only because of the massive stockpiles I had prepared. They continued to serve me faithfully. In exchange, I unlocked new supplies for them, because with enough money, you can buy anything. And in this apocalypse, supplies are the only currency that matters. Currently, the world has been carved up into three major powers. The first power is the military. They have a formidable arsenal and bases as solid as a rock. Wang Tung leads them, using his terrifying mind control abilities. The second power belongs to the zombies, where a king has finally emerged. He gained his power by devouring other mutated zombies and stealing their skills. Player Stalio Rujin even joined him, becoming the zombie king's lover. As his consort, she helps him rule. The third power is organized crime. Before the end, player 128 lived in the most dangerous country on Earth. He used his abilities to violently subjugate all the local gangs. Under his leadership, this criminal empire grew by ruthlessly robbing the survivors. Now, the remaining 26 players are all forced to depend on these three great forces. Player 128 has the power to control universal gravity. He's a powerful mastermind. In a one-on-one fight, no player can touch him. But despite that, his gang's actual power is the weakest of the three. They don't even try to compete, they just scavenge whatever they can find. I pulled up the profile for number 3, player 128. They've decided it's time to end the game once and for all. Right at that moment, the social system alert blared in my ears. Not again, I thought, seeing only 30 players left alive. The game difficulty was spiking again. We were entering the third phase, the continent of extreme cold. The temperature plummeted instantly. It's been a year and 5 months since the end. Nobody has food reserves left. With this freezing weather hitting now, everyone on the planet is marked for death. Then, Lu Ruyao sent me a private message. Mark, soon only zombies will be left, and I'll be one of them. You'll regret rejecting me forever, my love. Along with her message, she sent me a file. It was a photo of her standing next to the zombie king. I let out a cold laugh. If that's how it is, I'll send both you lovebirds straight to hell. The freezing weather swept across the entire planet, even reaching my tropical island. Every living thing was being pushed to the brink. A brutal blizzard slammed into my base, the future island. Everything was in danger, starting with the Celeste power grid. The wind and tidal power plants also took a massive hit. Luckily, the backup nuclear plant in the underground fortress was still holding up. It stayed operational, keeping the lights on. The gangs were the first to break. They had already looted everything, and internal conflicts were exploding. The fighting was nonstop, and even players with special powers were losing their lives. One by one they fell, so I sent a private message to player 128 through the world window to propose a deal. I told him, I've buried tons of supplies in your territory. If you can get to them, you'll survive. Player 128 replied almost instantly, asking, what do you want in return? I want you to take care of the kingdom, I replied. I explained that my team of scientists had finally created a zombie antidote. One spray is all it takes to make those monsters vanish for good. But as you know, I added, my own combat strength is basically zero. Looking at the 30 survivors left in the country, you're the strongest powered individual left. Only you can pull this off. We humans are dying in this extreme cold, but the zombies don't feel a thing. The longer we wait, the bigger the advantage those monsters have. No matter how many supplies I have, they'll run out eventually. If I don't act, player 101 and the zombie king will be the last one standing. That zombie king is on a completely different level. Without this antidote, no powered player stands a chance against him. I have the cure, and he has the power. It was time to cooperate. To earn player 128's trust, I sent mercenaries with a sample dose and a batch of supplies. They tested it on a zombie, and it dissolved into a puddle of blood with a horrific scream. Player 128 was stunned. He knew that if it were just the two of us left, killing me would be easy. He could snap his fingers and I'd be gone, but he knew I wasn't a threat. Since I'm technically the weakest player, teaming up with me was his smartest move. It was the only choice that made sense. That snowy night, I launched hundreds of drones loaded with the antidote toward the mainland. In the heart of the horde, the zombie king was asleep, holding Lu Rian close. His sharp ears caught the buzzing, and he tucked her back in before standing up. The antidote mist mixed with the falling snow, coating everything in its path. Zombies shrieked in agony as they melted into steaming pools of gore. The zombie king roared in fury, leaping into the air to blast my drones with beams of light. That's when player 128 made his move. He and his squad charged in, activating his universal gravity ability. He slammed the zombie king into the dirt so hard the monster couldn't even stand. As the zombie king struggled, several players lunged at him all at once. He let out a guttural roar, and the zombies hiding in the shadows responded. They swarmed out of the darkness, throwing themselves at the players. They climbed over each other like rabid monkeys. Player 128 didn't hesitate and activated his power again. The nearby skyscraper groaned, torn apart by the sheer force of his gravity. The structural beams snapped like toothpicks. The building collapsed, sending massive boulders of concrete raining down. The debris crushed the horde, burying the zombie king under tons of rubble. Player 128 allowed a victorious smirk to cross his face. He figured those rocks were enough to grind the monster into dust. Lu Rian stood on a high balcony, covering her face in terror. She let out a soul-piercing scream as player 128 turned his attention to her. He pointed a finger, and the balcony beneath her feet disintegrated. She plummeted from the heights, a fall that meant certain death. But in that split second, a shadow burst from the ruins. The zombie king leaped from the rubble to catch Lu Rian midair. While holding her, he lashed out with his free hand. He fired razor-thin threads that bound player 128 before he could even blink. With one sharp tug, the zombie king ripped player 128's body into bloody pieces. I had expected player 128 to be carrying the antidote on him. The antidote pouches were visible at the top of the screen. They exploded, engulfing him, while Lu Rian watched and screamed. She watched helplessly as the zombie king melted into a puddle. The scene was a literal hell, and she stood there, paralyzed by fear. She ran desperately into the distance, only to fall into an icy pit. No one was coming to save her this time. Relying on the love of others had failed her. On the global leaderboard, 12 more players were eliminated. I crossed their numbers off my notebook one by one. I reached number 128 and looked at the weakness I had noted down. Universal gravity can't control ultralight objects like the zombie king's webs. I love using information to create scenarios where my victory is guaranteed. I only have one opponent left, Wang Teng, the man who controls the army. He's desperate to end this game once and for all. He screamed at me through the world channel. Mark, this game was always for the elite. You've come far, and that's an achievement, but every game needs a loser. If you kill yourself now, I won't torture you. I knew you had mercenaries, but they're nothing compared to a real army. You just have a little bit of dirty money, but I have my children. I have an aircraft carrier and a fleet of fighter jets. No matter where you hide in this apocalypse, I will find you. In response, I posted a middle finger emoji to the world channel. Wang Teng's mind control power is strong, but it has one fatal weakness. He needs to be face-to-face to use it. As long as I stay hidden in my underground fortress, he's powerless. His greatest weapon is useless against me. Amen to that. But I didn't expect him to launch missiles directly at Future Island, relentlessly firebombing my home. A long time passed after the smoke cleared, and yet I was still there. I stayed online, and Wang Teng couldn't believe his eyes. Mark, your defenses are decent, but I'm coming to drag you out myself. He approached with his aircraft carrier, ignoring the reefs I had built in the shallows. When he finally landed on Future Island, the entire place was choked with thick, black smoke. The mountains were leveled, and the earth was torn open into deep, jagged craters. Every defensive fortification was gone, but when he saw the exposed entrance to my underground bunker, he smirked. He tasted victory and ordered his men to blast the door with heavy artillery and high-caliber rounds. After several intense volleys, the massive door was blown to pieces, revealing the dark passage leading deep inside. I was waiting for him right in the middle. I immediately sent him a video call request, and in his arrogance, he accepted. Staring into the dark passage on his screen, he spoke. Mark, it's too late to beg for mercy. He gestured for his men to move in, intending to drag me out by force. I calmly pointed behind me, at the vast, empty universe at my back. Who told you I was on Future Island? Open your eyes and look where I really am. As I spoke, a nuke detonated on the island. Wang Teng's name finally turned gray. The system let out a shrill announcement. Congratulations to player 99 for becoming the sole winner. I had cleared the phase. Among Wang Teng's subordinates was a player who could pinpoint a location just by looking at a photo. It seemed like a useless power, but Wang Teng realized he could use it against me. He had sent me countless video call requests, hoping to get a screenshot to track me down. I never accepted. But then, on New Year's Eve, I sent him a photo myself. In his heart, he mocked me for being a fool. He happily used the photo to locate my position, waiting for the zombie king to be eliminated so he could swoop in and kill me. But did he really think I didn't know who was working under him? I showed him that photo on purpose just to lure him to Future Island. Right after sending that photo, I walked out of the church. The system rewarded me with a special prize for reaching Future Island. It was a game changer. The reward was simple but absolute. The chance to travel anywhere I wanted. Without hesitation, I grabbed my supplies. I was instantly teleported far away to a massive space station. But the system blocked any return to Earth. I couldn't use that option until the very end.